it's that time of year again when the government is convincing us they're insisting they're getting a grip on immigration and are restoring order and control at our broken borders. And new figures out today, the Home Office have claimed that they have deported 60,000 illegal migrants since taking office. But it still remains that since 2018, just 4% of small boat arrivals have ever been returned. 4%. Now that's 7,612 of over 190,000 illegal immigrants. Now, Channel migrants' arrivals from last year remain stubbornly high, with nearly 41,500 migrants, and that's up 13%. Don't forget, yesterday was already a yearly record, and we looked set to be on track for a record year. Now, the top 5 nationalities of those coming here on those boats are from Eritrea, Afghanistan, Iran, Sudan and Somalia. It's worth pointing out some of the most likely to commit violent crimes and sex crimes on British shores. Let's go further. Some 30,657 asylum seekers were in hotels at the end of December, and this is the bit the government thinks is great. That's 19% fewer than last year. Though nearly 73,000 are now being housed in longer-term accommodation, including former military sites, HMOs, and perhaps even a house near you. Well, joining us now is GB News' Homeland Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, a pleasure to have you back on the show. You and I have been through this data. We've dived deeply into it. And I put it to you, the government is giving us this positive spin. Oh, don't worry, lads. It's 18% fewer asylum seekers in hotels. Nothing to worry about it. Mark, they're not solving the problem. They're simply moving it around the country and potentially to a street near our viewers.
Yes, because it's not 18% fewer asylum seekers in government-funded accommodation. They, as you say, are just being moved from hotels into houses of multiple occupancy in a street right next to you, potentially. And that carries with it some real concerns because, of course, as absolutely annoying and disturbing as it is to have a hotel in your local community taken out of commission for sometimes years at a time, and the loss of that amenity, at least you have, 150, 200 migrants in an area where they are, where they can increase police patrols, where people know, perhaps if they're concerned, to be a little more careful. It's different when you're moving people out, half a dozen or so in each household, to literally your next door street. So obviously there's concerns about that. And if it's not houses of multiple occupancy, Martin, of course, it's increasingly military bases as well. But the difficulty there, as we've discussed at length on this show, is that they're not held detained in those military camps. They are allowed to walk free just as they are in a house of multiple occupancy or indeed in a hotel. And that concerns people, especially in rural communities next to these military bases where hundreds of migrants are often placed.
Every time your phone connects to public Wi-Fi, anyone nearby could snoop on what you're doing. Hackers can steal your information, passwords, photos, and bank details in just seconds. ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. ExpressVPN is so easy to use. With just one click of a button, you're protected. Streaming, banking, or shopping, you can switch between high-speed servers worldwide in seconds, and your connection never slows down. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free, all backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your online life today.
And Mark White, the shocking points that only 4% of these men, let's face it, they're almost always men, walking down the gangplank there towards Hotel Britannia where the meals are free, paid for by British taxpayers. Only 4% ever get sent back. And the dangerous countries on that list, Eritrea, Iran, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, and the analysis we've done repeatedly on this channel shows they are amongst the most dangerous men coming into our nation in terms of violence and sexual offences. Next, let's turn to the numbers of people being deported, Mark. Again, the government trumpeting good news today, but the enforced deportations, some 9,900, we believe, actually is a fraction of the total amount. Most people are going back of their own accord, and loads of them are getting paid to go.
Yes, I mean, let's look at that figure there, 60,000. That's since Labour came to power in July of 2024. So for the rest of that year, there was a few thousand more, obviously, that they deported. Then, of course, you've had the whole of last year, so they're saying 60,000. But actually, last year alone, it was 46,000 that they managed to deport. But I think you point to a very pertinent issue there, and that is the fact that actual deportations, where you're hoping that people are forcibly removed from the country in handcuffs if they need to be, especially if they're foreign national offenders. Actually, that's happening in a minority of cases, 9,900 last year to December. So the remaining 37,000 went voluntarily. Some didn't even get in the border. 18,000 were stopped at airports and ports and then just turned around and flew back home or took a boat back over the channel or whatever they did. And then 28,000 are voluntary returns. And the real issue about voluntary returns that people have concerns with is the voluntary payment scheme. The fact that this government pays people in order to go willingly and not put up a fight. Now, you can see perhaps the logic of the government in this, saying if they decide to go down the road of having a prolonged fight with an individual, it costs us much more. But there's a logic of it, and then there's what feels right. And for many, many people, this just feels wrong, that you're rewarding people with up to £3,000 who've broken into the country, who've worked in the illegal economy, who've got up to whatever potential harms in society before eventually being removed from the country.
Mark White, excellent analysis as ever. Thank you very much for bringing that to us here on GB News. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio in Westminster by the journalist David Shipley. David, welcome to Westminster. A huge amount of information to take in there, but the prevailing mood here is we're given the spin that the government is back in control of our borders. There are fewer people in asylum seeker hotels, but the reality is they're not solving the problem, they're simply moving the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everything Mark has just said is correct. You know, the government seems a bit confused. They seem to think the issue is asylum seekers in hotels. And it's not. The issue is that asylum seekers, particularly Afghan and Eritrean men, keep committing horrific violent crimes against British men, women and children. That's what people are unhappy about. And absolutely, again, it's true that moving them from a hotel where we know where they are to being scattered across communities and HMOs is actually worse in lots of ways. And the military bases are a bit of a fake. I think they sound tough because it's a military base, but actually this is just somewhere near a town that they can leave when they want. Also, if you look at the sort of illegal migrant deportations, they're talking about 60,000, so it's a big number. The most recent estimates we have suggest there could be up to 1 million illegal migrants in this country. And they were from 5 years ago. There could well be very, very many more now, and 60,000 in a year and a half is nothing.
When you look at the nations that we simply can't get people back to, Eritrea, Iran, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, and when you see it's a pathetic 4% ever return, and by the way, Mark White told us that a lot of those are where they go back to their own nation voluntarily, because guess what? Afghanistan might not be a war zone that's unsafe after all. They voluntarily go back to a Taliban-run Afghanistan of their own volition. It says something, I think, pertinent, and it says to me, if you're a man from one of the most dangerous nations on earth and you make it to Britain, you're almost guaranteed to stay here.
You are. That's true. And if you look at it, it's something like 99% and above of Afghans and Eritreans are never deported. So that's a huge problem. We know that these men, Afghans, for example, are between 14.5 and 22 times more likely to be convicted of a sexual offence. These are not safe people to have in our country. And at no other time in history would a nation have thought it was reasonable to import tens of thousands of men who we know to pose such a huge risk and then just house them alongside women and children in our nation. It's a crazy policy.
Do you think part of the liberal delusion, I don't use that phrase lightly, is that there seems to be this feeling that the moment anybody from anywhere on the planet steps foot on British soil, they become enlightened. They suddenly prescribe to British values. Last week, David, we carried the story that the Taliban has legalised domestic violence. You can beat a woman unless you break her bones or have open wounds. It's fine. You can do the same to your children. That's the law in Afghanistan. Are we surprised when people come to our country and think that kind of stuff is okay?
I think you're absolutely right. It's partly this belief that when people land at Heathrow or cross the Channel, they suddenly change. It's also this fixation we have with the idea that we have to treat everyone individually. And we have to wait for these men to commit a crime before we can do anything about it. And actually, we know that Afghanistan is one of the worst countries on earth to be a woman. Unsurprisingly, Afghan men are dangerous and terrible to women on average. And so therefore we can either import lots and wait to see which ones will commit crimes, or we can say more sensibly, we're just not going to let Afghans in anymore. And we can choose to do these things. Germany, for example, has agreed a deal with the Taliban under which they are now deporting Afghans. So it's a choice. If Germany can do it, we can.
Do you think that the British government, or a British government, or perhaps a future British government, as much flack as they would take from it, they perhaps should sit down with the Taliban and say, look, you've got to take some of these people back?
Of course. I mean, I think realistically, as I said, if Germany are able to do it, why can't we? Germany are a member of the ECHR. Germany is a civilised country. If Germany can work out a way of deporting illegal migrants from Afghanistan who've arrived, I'm sure we can.
David Shipley, I think you're exactly right. And it's so important to dive into this information deeply and not just take government spin at face value. Thanks for joining us today in the studio. I appreciate your expertise. David Shipley. Now, in response to all of this, a Home Office spokesperson has told GB News this. The statistics show that real progress as we restore order and control to our borders. We've removed nearly 60,000 illegal migrants. Numbers in asylum hotels are down. Law enforcement action against people smugglers is at record levels. And we are bearing down on the asylum backlog.